Okay, I think it's 25 past, so we have quite a lot to cover still. So let's resume, and I'll hand over to Nelson for leading us through session 3 on the social dimension of agroecology. So over to you, Nelson.
Yeah, thank you, Steph. Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon session after a break. Maybe, Steph, if you could help me to screen my presentation. Just to start my short introduction, I'm Nelson Muzingwa. I'm actually a very practical farmer on the ground who is very much passionate about agroecology, and I believe in walking the talking. So I'm going to share with you why it is crucial for social movement dimension to be part of this agroecology that many of us are just hoping to achieve. And for us to end up having food sovereignty, there should be a lot of influence on the process of agroecology. So on the photos, if you can look at the bottom photo, we need numbers. We need many people who have to be influenced for them to be able. If you check on the second photo, there are members now who are actually taking action. They are setting up dead level control, and they've been influenced. They feel that they should be part of that change to get water onto their soil. So the impact on the last photo, you see on top over there, there's now lots of water that is there. It's not all about just talking. We need action that is to actually come up with some clear results that we need to achieve. On the next slide, Steph. Yeah, the objectives of this discussion is actually to understand social movement building and why it is very, very crucial in agroecology. And also we want to try to bring some art so that at least there is that influence, an activist influence for transformational change towards agroecology, social movement building. So we will need to discuss this quite a bit and try to understand more how that process then can unfold for action to happen. There are, from the discussions, from the presentations, I've actually got quite a number of interesting points where we were talking a lot about why it is very necessary for that social movement and what exactly, how much do we understand on social movement. So here we have just some few definitions that are there, which otherwise more like repeating what we were discussing, to say that there is really no some kind of a clear definition or just a single consensus definition on a social movement. This can be just a type of a group action that could be large, and some can be very small, depending on the numbers and on the issues that they want to address. Sometimes you find some are very informal and some are quite formal. They organize and they get themselves to some point of formality for them to actually push an agenda if it is very long term. So these are groups of individuals or organizations which focus on specific political or social issues. They usually carry out or resist or undo a social change. If there is an issue that they would need to change, that social change must actually happen, and it has to be a part of one of their goals, at least to achieve. So in terms of for us to amplify agroecology, we actually need a social movement of very much diverse action for that social change on food systems actually to happen, for us to get to really achieve best results on agroecology. It is that factor to achieve food sovereignty, and it is that factor to actually control and be on the driver's seat, like you can see on the photos, that there is, if suppose we are now managing the water cycle very well, and on the farmers we have so much diverse seeds, spreading all over our countries, and farmers are growing healthy food that they are almost like enjoying, and the environment, microclimates have been created. So it is very, very important for us to have that social change to happen. Yeah, why social movement building is very much crucial for agroecology. If you can look at it, we have some social cultural context whereby there is that concentration of power in food and farming systems by the conventional narrative that has logged it in the industrial logic, posing immense barriers to social and cultural change. We need that change over that narrative. So we have to build against it, and we have to be in numbers for us to actually undo that conventional kind of a narrative. Yeah, if you look at the political dimension, you will find that within our countries, there's a growing population that for us to be able to feed our country's productivity is actually based on use of industrial inputs. There's no any other thinking which is otherwise more important to look at other than that kind of a narrative. And there's also that saying that it's only biotech science and the global food corporates that can find effective solutions to feed the hungry population. And there is that discussion again on innovation and useful knowledge only coming from science and technology, just being driven by experts and protected by patents, leaving out, in fact, the majority who are the farmers, who are the actual food producers, who have the land, and we have that knowledge, and we have inherited lots of this kind of different experiences to be able to drive their own food systems. If you look on the ecological context, the current chemical input approach to agriculture is actually proving to be very wasteful, ineffective, and contributing to deepening inequalities and hunger. This is just indicators that we are seeing in many countries. If you look at our region in Southern Africa, and this, like the case of Zimbabwe, which has been almost like a breadbasket now, we have this basket case issue, which is a crisis that we have to change from an ecological point of view. And it is promising future generations' ability to meet their food needs by reducing biodiversity and increasing soil and water pollution. You see, that's what is happening. It's very clear that there's loss of biological diversity loss, and there is loss of soil and water pollution in some cases. In our regions, we are experiencing right now the issue of climate change, and those are actually critical issues if you look at it from a context, from an ecological context. And the last point is that food and agriculture are now deeply implicated in the climate crisis and loss of biodiversity, the erosion of rural livelihood, and the contamination of land and water. And that also is a very important point to look at. Then if you look on the economic context, you will find that the global market then continues to determine the prices of cash crops, impacting farming systems where smallholder farmers, especially women and youth, are now concentrate on farming to generate cash rather than feeding their households and even their nation. People are farming money, not farming food, which they have to feed their households, and yet we don't eat cash. So you find again, many smallholder farmers have entered into contract farming and are now using the bulk of their land to grow cash crop for the global market instead of growing food crops for their households and nations. And there is that deliberate neglect of local crops whereby farmers are eating what they do not grow and growing what they do not eat, a new form of invisible slavery, land grabbing, and supply of cheap labor. These are issues that we have to organize ourselves. These are issues that we have to think very deep, and these are issues that we have to discuss, and we have to get many of our consumers and even producers understand into building up from the grassroots to challenge the status quo. So we have some existing case studies that are there. People are just not seated, just letting it going, and there are issues that they are taking up, and they are organizing themselves. So you would find there are emerging communities of practice on agroecology that are providing a framework for understanding levels for the transition to sustainable food systems. Yeah, I've just given some examples. From Zimbabwe, we have Chikukwa Ecological Land Use Community Trust. It's a community that has organized itself, and it is building up from the grassroots some kind of a movement that will have to undo certain policies on food systems, and also showcasing better examples that have to grow food and then supply the local economies. We also have the example of Porret, and we also have the example of Shasha Agroecology. There are many examples countrywide whereby grassroots movements are coming up, and these we have to understand them. And what we have to also know what has been the motive behind their formulation, and we have to know how they are organizing, and we have to learn and also be even to connect to them. Then we have also CSOs collaborating on policy dialogues at national, regional, and international spaces to define local food systems which are ecologically, socially, economically, and culturally appropriate to their unique contexts, and to empower producers and consumers to make better decisions and choices. In Zimbabwe, we have the Zimbabwe Seed Sovereignty Program. This is it's almost like 7 organizations, farmers organizations, and civil society organizations that have come together to actually advocate and also to showcase the good practices to achieve food sovereignty. We have the Seed and Knowledge Initiative that many of us are members, and at continental level, we have the Alliance of Food Sovereignty in Africa, and at global level, there is this Global Peace and Movement of La Via Campesina, and where many organizations have come together from the grassroots to challenge the World Trade Organizations, the policies that are being debated, and the issue of climate crisis, whereby we talk about climate justice, and we need to challenge whatever the corporates could be talking for us to be able to sustain our lives. So these are case studies of social movements that are growing along to supporting the movement on agroecology. We have strategies to advancing social movement building in agroecology. Here, our aim is to influence the head, heart, feeling towards social movement building on agroecology. You know, we need action. Yeah, I think there was a lot of discussion on the issue of action and the need of actually taking bold decisions, for at least to get things done, and getting that passion into ourselves and taking a movement in order to achieve the results that we could be expecting. So how we getting through this is actually raising awareness, raising at local, national, regional, continental, and international levels. And we having also a lot of policy dialogues and engagements, and there is lots of documentation and sharing of good practices, and setting up good examples and developing strategies to amplify agroecology, and as well as building alliances and networks to challenge the status quo. And this is how we have to build strategies that will have to enhance the movement on agroecology. We have some examples that that have been tested by many countries from the different movements that I could have mentioned. You take the examples of Zimbabwe Seed Sovereignty Program, or at international, the La Via Campesina examples. There's quite a lot of emphasis on farmer-to-farmer learning, because the farmers at the grassroots, they will need to get things going, because they are the people who are actually directly affected. And how can we influence that movement at that level? There is need for participatory, affordable. These are actually participatory and quite affordable fun spaces that help to fill the knowledge gap at community level. They actually help bringing together local farmers to exchange knowledge and actually even production resources, and leading from behind is a very important issue that has to give the farmers opportunities to discuss best agroecological practices, such as maybe, for example, using on-seed resources, improving soil fertility, and even the issue to doing with water harvesting, and many other practices that have to go along with enhancing agroecology. There is also a very important area where we talk about exchange visits, where we realize that these are just spaces for farmers to learn from each other, to allow farmers to experience actually the reality, because many of us actually see learn by seeing things on the ground and actually adopt and to what we think could be most appropriate to our own situations. And we also understand that farmers really, they learn better from other farmers other than from technocrats. And we have realized again that each experience is quite unique and very valuable to ensure continuity of the good practices. We also have organized spaces to raise awareness and engagements, such as organizing field days. Many of our organizations and many of members within the CSO groupings, they start emphasis to say we have to organize some kind of gatherings where we bring in farmers, we bring in CSOs, we bring in even policymakers to learn from by seeing and also trying to influence. And then there are also dialogues and workshops and conferences at local level on the value of traditional seeds and agroecology and nutrition is those issues that we have to be dialoguing as much as that to try to bring in the agroecology dimension. Right, we also have very important area over there in terms of collaborating and networking, whereby we emphasis on building a very strong voice to engage more farmers, CSOs, or national and regional governments to uphold farmers' rights and protect local knowledge. I think we've talked quite a lot that there is quite an emphasis that as we build the agroecology movement in our region, we will need to recognize the importance and the valueness of local knowledge. So again, we have to influence fellow farmers, policymakers, and like-minded institutions to adopt agroecology, and we have to strengthen the documentation of good agroecological practices and trying to disseminate that information, at least to publish it so that it can reach to many audience within the producers and the consumers level for them to join this kind of a movement. And because numbers usually they count quite a lot. So this is the end of my presentation. Let me take this opportunity to thank you. If there is any questions or issues that you might have, this is the time that I can give you to raise, and then we can discuss together. Thank you so much for your listening.
Thanks, Nelson. If I may just come in here, it's just questions of clarification at this point on Nelson's presentation, because we have a longer session for discussion after the other three presentations. But for now, if you've got any a question of clarification on Nelson's presentation, we have 5 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Steph.
And while people are thinking about their questions, just to say, Nelson, you're a farmer, but you're also a farmer leader, being the national coordinator for the Zimbabwe Smallholder Farmer Forum, Organic Farmer Forum, and hosting the global peasant movement, La Via Campesina, at the moment. So, prestigious presenter. So anybody, any questions to Nelson? We're so clear.
Maybe I was very clear, or maybe I confused.
But very comprehensive for sure, and really rooted from your experience as a farmer and working with other farmers. Elfrida, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just struggled. Yeah, thank you, Nelson. That was really great. I think Something that maybe I just want to add in a way is that I think in some parts of the world, some Lavia campesina, and in some places in Africa also, is that I think some of these movements and the action of movements, especially around land, but also seed, are getting criminalized by some governments. So it can become, it can also just become quite a dangerous, almost, just that angle is also there to keep in mind, that it can be, it's not always just seed fairs and a safe space, it can be quite a dangerous space, this movement. Just something to keep in mind. I don't know if you have any comment on that, Nelson. It's really a struggle for life, for many people.
I did not get the last part, Elf.
Yeah, I was just saying that it's, I think in some parts of the world, but sometimes also in Africa, it becomes a very, it's such a struggle, and the movement's actions can become sort of criminalized by certain governments, just because they, like the industry is so strong, the power of money, and that is often, it can become quite a challenging, life-threatening situation. I mean, we've seen movements like that, and farmers being in that situation. So
Yes, we have quite a number of such cases, particularly in where there is quite a lot of influence of industry, because there is with industry, our governments, particularly in Africa, are very, very poor, and they depend on aid very much, and to the level of the extent that they begin to believe more of the influence of aid over decisions. And we're seeing lots of these crazy ideas then coming up on board, like the issue of climate smart agriculture now being talked quite a lot, and any voice that will go against what industry who are riding onto capital are saying, then makes the farmers to be criminalized. And this is where the issue of numbers then counts, and the issue of maybe saying we need to showcase our examples on the ground then comes in, so that at least we can defend ourselves by examples. We need the results that we have to see on the ground that can easily convince policymakers, because they will be seeing us with those better results as compared to whatever could be driven and whatever industry could be saying. So those are critical issues that we have actually to deal with, at least to get our members not very much suffer the criminalization, and even some of them the issues of land grabbing that we again see. So I don't know whether I tried to add some information to your issues, Elf.
thank you.
You're welcome. Then from Baba John, yes, I've worked very much with Lavia Campesina for the past 7, 8 years now, right? And having even reached out to many different continents, and having seen the different kind of contexts that are existing in the different countries. And what I've noted here, we will find with Africa, I think it is all about the influence of donor funding over farmers. You would find our movement in Africa, it's a little bit weak. It's not very much owned by the responsible farmers, to say. It is mostly owned at most by non-governmental organizations, to the extent of even representation, whereby there is need to get the farmers' voice, and you find the issues that then can be presented will not reflect the issues that could be driven by the farmers. So which is quite different if you reach out to the different continents that really are dealing with this kind of work. It's not as similar to, say, Latin America and other different continents, like even in Asia, the struggles in Asia versus those in Africa and those in even in Europe, where even industry is almost like pushed quite a lot, is quite different.
Thanks. And there are two other hands raised, blue hands. So first Lawrence and then Rosaline, and we'll stop there for discussion. So Lawrence, do you want to ask a question to Nelson?
Yeah, thank you, Steph. Thanks, Nelson, for the highlights. I wanted to agree with Elfrida that the space is not always safe. Like in South Africa, in the mining sector, the activists are being targeted and killed. And if you are standing on the way, people are targeting you and they'll shoot you. So it's not always the safe space sometimes.
Thanks, Lawrence. So it's more like a comment. Rosaline, do you want to come in?
Good afternoon. Many thanks, Nelson. Recently, I had a workshop with stakeholders, and we were talking about AE. And one of the questions that they asked me is, farmers at some point practiced AE and they decided to stop, or they stopped. Now that we are promoting AE, whose agenda is it? Maybe you could also help me answering that question. Whose agenda is it? That is the first question. Then the second question is, how do we sustain interest in the social movement, especially in AE? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roslyn. Yeah, it's my agenda as a farmer anyway, because they could be farmers, like I mentioned before, that you find farmers, some those who could be being driven by NGOs. It's not their agenda. They're actually doing it for purposes of fulfilling maybe the needs of that organization. But then there are cases whereby it is really my agenda that I should have water at my own household, because it's me who will then need that water, and I should have I should not live in a desert. I need to live in a very healthy environment that is quite conducive to stay in. So it's really my agenda as a family farmer, and it is me who could be suffering from many diseases that I will have to even know that this is coming from the food I'm eating. So it's my agenda, and the way I have to influence others is just by showcasing. They must see how I'm feeding my family, how I'm generating income, and how I'm even conserving my environment, how I'm managing my livestock and the diverse food that is right on my doorstep. These are actually tools that any advocate or activist of agroecology we have to carry the right tools when we are talking about movement building, so that at least we can be able to influence change. We must almost like be the models of agroecology, so that others can follow the best of what we could be doing. I don't know whether I managed to address your question.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
Most welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. I think unfortunately we have to leave it here for now, but please feel free to continue the conversation with Nelson on the chat box. But we still have the three other illustrations, and then the discussion, and then the way forward. So I'm afraid we're already behind time. So just to advise you, I think we'll go over time and probably up to 3 o'clock, but we'll really try to make sure we don't go over 3 o'clock. But thank you very much, Nelson and and also the participants for your engagement on Nelson's presentation. And yeah, over to you, Nelson, for moderating the next session.
Thank you, Steph. Yeah, as follow-up to my presentations, we have also pre-recordings that Nick is going to help us to share. We have a pre-record from Heidi. Heidi is actually a researcher with SKI partner, the UTC, at the bioeconomy chair, and is the author of the chapter on food sovereignty movement in Africa, in the upcoming book on seed justice that the SKI partner UCT is actually coordinating. So we are going to have a pre-record which Nick will help us to do, and we also have pre-recording from Pharma, who is program officer to AFSA, and is based in Dakar. Then the last will be from Marcia Andrews, who is actually a feminist activist who has extensively published on women's movement in the SADC region, and she's actually the coordinator of Rural Women Assembly. So Nick, over to you, Nick, to screen the...
Thank you very much, Nelson. I will show Hades first.
Hi everybody, my name is Hedy Swanby. I'm talking about African food sovereignty movement in Africa, or food movements in Africa. And at the moment, I've been writing about the movement for a chapter in a book. So I'm just going to share with you some of my findings so far. I'd really love to be with you all in person, but it's good to be able to be with you through video. So I'm always used to talking about food sovereignty in the language of La Via Campesina, the language that they use. So I was surprised in a number of interviews to hear people speaking about it in a slightly different way. And this quote from an interview for me sets the scene. And my interviewee said, "When we talk about the food sovereignty movement, we're thinking about a movement that's fighting. The notion is that a movement is articulating issues and fighting the dominant system. But a food sovereignty movement has always existed in Africa. Food sovereignty in Africa is rooted in practice, is deeply connected to nature and embedded in the more than human world. Non-human agency is part of the movement. It shapes and catalyzes and participates in our movement. Nature is the one that speaks to us in a profound way. The trees and forests inspire us to a very different conversation. We just practice, we do, we be who we are. And that is the characteristic of our movement. That is our resistance. African food movements have long claimed that Africa has solutions to the modernization of agriculture and may even have wisdom to impart on the transformation of global food regimes. So the global north defines modernity as commodification of food production, spurred on by technological progress, leading to higher yields of a small portfolio of crops. However, African food movements have always argued that the defining measure of a successful food production system is the empowerment of small-scale food producers who are keenly aware of their local ecologies, economies, social needs, and agrobiodiversity. They've struggled for recognition of local knowledge and practices and demanded political will to nurture and build upon the food production systems that are already operating on the ground and providing between 60 and 80% of the continent's food. The global north has largely ceded their sustenance and food sovereignty to a handful of transnational corporations that control their food from seed, oceans, and fields to their plates. In contrast, many Africans retain their knowledge and skills regarding food, fodder, medicine, and shelter, and continue to steward an incredible and priceless pool of agrobiodiversity. This knowledge cannot be separated from the territories, societies, and cultural and spiritual practices from which it is constantly emerging. This dynamic diversity and this solidarity with and embeddedness in the living natural world is a frustrating force for the spirit of neoliberalism, which wants to make everything the same and everything dependent on money. While a good number of policies on the continent promote the so-called modernization of agriculture, African farmers have for the most part rejected the Green Revolution, choosing instead their superior diversity of agricultural resources to meet their multifaceted needs. Efforts to impose the gene revolution on the continent have also been thwarted over the past 2 decades for a number of reasons. This frustration at effectively advancing the Green Revolution on the ground in Africa has intensified the attack on the ontological underpinnings of African agriculture. By ontological, I mean how we believe the world works and what our understanding of reality is. African agricultural practices are labeled primitive, backward, inefficient, and in need of modernization. The ineffectiveness of African agricultural practices and resources has traditionally been the reason given for chronic hunger and malnutrition in Africa, rather than the real cause, which is the extractive and exploitive imperatives of imperialism, which continue in the guise of neoliberalism today. Many have argued that scientific knowledge ignores and marginalizes local knowledge, and local knowledge is deliberately ignored by the dominant knowledge system. The African food sovereignty movement is strongly rooted in the need to recognize the web of life and social relations in which we participate, and the individual and social obligations that arise from living in a moral, vital universe. This is in direct contradiction to the current dominant mode of production and living, which Donna Andrews shows orientates society towards economic growth and efficiency, necessitating the exploitation of all species. Nimo Bassi speaks of the need for resource democracy, the need to resource, to reconnect with Earth, our source of life, and to respect her as a living being with inherent rights and not just a resource to be exploited. Bassi recognizes that humans are a subset of nature and that we're embedded in our resources, our territories where we manage forests, rivers, soils, and sustenance through reciprocity and informed actions. Much of the work of the African Biodiversity Network has been to celebrate this knowledge and practice. It is impossible to know of and to list all of the actors and organizations that have played a role in growing African food movements. The story includes family farmers, fishers, pastoralists, healers, and the women who nurture their families and communities, and those who continue their practice despite the harsh conditions, lack of formal support, and stigma attached to their ways. It includes a myriad of innovative locals marketing and distributing food, community governance systems and local leaders who have defended their territories, community organizations such as church or saving groups, faith-based community organizations, consumers, NGOs and donors, and the tangle of alliances with other movements across the globe, technical experts and government institutions. Mamadou Goïta demonstrates how the lived and networked experiences of small producers is the blueprint for food sovereignty. He says, There is interdependence between the producer of millet, sorghum, and corn, the herder, the small fisherman. They all use the same resources, the same land for agriculture, grazing, or fishery. This creates interactions between social movements of herders, small peasant producers, fishermen, agricultural workers, and movements of those who want fair trade. The relations and communications between movements plays an important role in building a strong global coalition for food sovereignty. Furthermore, he reminds us that it's not only issues of the food web that are of concern, because small producers also need social infrastructure, including health, education, clean water, as well as different modes of production. Many mark the emergence of the formal food sovereignty movement on the African continent in 2004, when Rapa and UNAC joined the Latin American-based La Via Campesina movement as a response to trade liberalization and the destruction of local markets in the face of cheap, subsidized imports. Since that time, other farmer movements, such as the East and Southern African Farmers Forum, ESAF, have also become crucial nodes in La Via Campesina. And in 2007, a number of groups came together and brought 600 delegates from 5 continents with an interest in agricultural and food issues to Nyeleni in Mali, where they made the famous Nyeleni Declaration. Consolidation of 21 African networks into the Pan-African Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, AFSA, at the UNFCCC, the Climate Change Conference of Parties in Durban, is another major milestone in the development of the movement. Along the way, the movement has been supported by numerous NGOs and experts who have carefully researched technological trends, corporate agendas, and followed international policy on agriculture-related technology, intellectual property rights, and the enclosure of the commons, amongst others. Of course, Northern donors also continue to be key players in the movement. I don't have time here to go into findings around the debates and issues around power relations between donors, NGO, and food producers, but for sure there are many problematic issues there that need to be aired and ironed. So according to La Via Campesina, some of the issues within the purview of food sovereignty include defending and protecting land, water, territories, seed and biodiversity, redistributive agrarian reform, secure access to land, territories and resources, agroecology and sustainable peasant agriculture, cooperative production and marketing, preventing corporate domination, capture and control over seeds, land, water, technology, knowledge, markets, and policy making. Resisting privatization, dismantling liberal trade investment regimes, stopping the criminalization of frontline communities and rights defenders, and upholding the rights of small-scale providers and workers. These are the issues that have knitted together and mobilized an African food sovereignty movement and linked it with others across borders. Seed is one of the most lively and generative themes in the African food sovereignty movement. And indeed, as the Nyeleni says, peasant seeds are the heart of the struggle for food sovereignty. Across the continent, seed fairs and caravans, community and household seed banks, and food and seed cuisine festivals are spaces of celebration and solidarity, spaces to share traditional knowledge and skills, for example, construction of traditional granaries, sowing and nursery techniques, seed conservation, bread making with millet, a myriad of activities around skill sharing, as well as sites of political education and struggle against the destruction of farmer seed systems and the laws that seek to eradicate them. So that's pretty much what I have to share with you, and my feeling that that African food movements are powerful and diverse and in constant development and growth, making new connections and growing from grassroots through to national, regional, and international levels. And it seems that the time for African food sovereignty has really come, and we seem to be ready to take the challenge. Thank you very much for your attention, and hope to have some further chats in the next session.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to share with you from part of our experience in the seed movement in West Africa. My name is Pharma, Senegalese, based in Senegal, and I'm a NASA program officer. Yes. So the seed movement in West Africa, I will say that all started with ASPSP. It means in French, Association Sénégalaise des Producteurs de Semences Paysannes, or in English, Senegalese Association of Peasant Seed Producers. It started in 2003, where 2 to 3 people, among them I will list Mr. Lamine Biaye from Senegal, Mr. Aliou Ndiaye from Senegal also, and Mr. Dembaba from Senegal. The first belongs to the southern part of Senegal, the second, the middle part of Senegal, and the third, the northern part of Senegal. So they reach out all the farmers' organizations and start to talk about the need for seed sovereignty. So between 2003 and 2007, they were reaching all the farmers' organizations in the country and make their best to have in those organizations a kind of focal point or contact person in an organization that belongs or that believes on farmers' seeds or peasant seeds. And they were able to organize at least 2 national or community seed festivals between 2003 and 2006. And from the learning of those seed festivals, they decided to organize in 2007 regional seed festival. If I say regional, for West Africa, because in the starting period, they get in touch with other countries, some like Mali, Benin, Togo, Burkina Faso, and so on. In 2011 is a kind of big shift. The 2011 Seed Festival, the conclusion, we discussed and say we need to scale it up. And in that reflection of the 2011, so the third edition of the Seed Festival, we say we will create COASP. In French, it means Comité Ouest Africain pour les Semences Paysannes. In English, West African Committee for Peasant Seeds. And for each country, there is a country coordinator and an assistant to the country coordinator. So each country has a country coordinator for COASP and a country assistant coordinator for COASP. And those 2 people do not belong to the same organization. So if we say the West African Committee for Peace and Seeds, we are about 9 countries: Senegal, Mali, Gambia, the two Guinea, Benin, Togo, Burkina Faso, yes, and Mauritania, something like that. Now, this is how the movement have evolved. Now, in terms of the seed festival itself, because it's those gatherings that bring connection to people. The seed festival, at least for the Senegalese one, is organized in the village level where we don't have electricity. We managed to have it in full moon light. So this environment, I think, has really give energy people to come in a space where there are not restrictions, where you live with the nature and so on. This is first. Second, for each seed festival, there is a theme or a topic. For instance, one of them, the theme was granary. If you say seed savers network or seed granary, yes. How our ancestors, our parents used to save their seed, where they are keeping the granary. And as the theme was granary, we have a lot of sessions and training about that. Another one was about millet. Millet is very popular in dry countries, and there are various types of millet and various dishes you can organize around millet. Another theme was about women, biodiversity, and nutrition. Now, there are also some principles. We use peasant rather than farmer. For us, peasant has lot of value. Even if in some books, when they say peasant, it refers to someone who is poor and so on. But the value around peasant for us here in West Africa is very, very high. And we try to use it, promote it, we change the narrative around peasant. And for us also, farmer, if you translate farmer in French, it means fermier. And a farmer is someone who doesn't own the land, he leases it. And a farmer also is someone who doesn't belong to that environment. And as he doesn't belong to that environment, he wants to take care of it. So, and a farmer can be everyone who just came on the weekend farm and go back. But the peasant belongs to the next system. So all these are the reason why we do peasant rather than farm in terms of principle. Another principle is about where the seeds are stored. We prefer to use granary or seed hut, H-U-T, rather than bank. For us, bank is very business oriented, is very capitalistic and so on. So we prefer to use the seeds hut, H-U-T. Another one, in the seed festival venue, it's completely forbidden to sell seeds. You can share, you can exchange, you can do whatever you want, but you cannot sell them over there around the seed venue. So those principles of solidarity and using word or vocabulary that are very that we own, we are familiar with, I think it gives some space to the participant to see there. So another one now is what are we doing? Yes, in the COASPE, the West African Committee for Peas and Seeds, we focus on the practice around seeds. If I say practice is, yes, how to cook it, how to multiply it, how to use it, any type of use you can do about the seeds. And we also focus on the plant treaty, where the farmers have been given rights. in terms of selling, sharing, exchanging whatever you know about rights around seeds. So those principles bring us together. So the advocacy is more about applying, implementing farmers' rights. And the work we are currently doing is what is a seed hut, what is a seed granary, a community seed granary. From one place to another, the way it functions. But for us, that is how in a community, either it's a village, either it's a group of village, how they are circulating the diversity of seeds inside that community or that village and making sure they are not loose. They are not, the seeds are not lost. And even in past day, one of our sentence we used to say, a seed or a seed or a variety doesn't disappear. It has just moved from one place to another. So when you don't see it in your place, go around, you will find it somewhere and it will come back. Maybe what I will add is that this COASPE is not, if I can use, a legal entity. It's not registered somewhere. We use whatever structure exists in one country and ask it to host the COASPE or the West African Seed Committee of this country. So those platforms at country level come together and form what we call the West African Seed Committee. But in some countries, they are trying to register it, so to make it legal. For instance, in Burkina Faso, they tried. And yes, unfortunately, some of the founders of COASPE are saying that the entity that is in Burkina Faso is not representative, it's very NGO-driven, something like that. So we are still in the time, if I can call it, learning process on how to be together without too much administration. Because as we are, since 2003, we are working, we are doing our seed fair, and people are coming to the seed festival. A minimum of 150 are coming from abroad, and 150 to 200 are coming from Senegal every year. And every year is launched by the governor who is representing the President of the Republic. So despite the rules or the legislation about seeds, selling, and so on, the representative of the governor used to open, to launch, and to close the ceremony. So this is what I can say about the seed movement in West Africa, and it's growing, it's increasing, it's growing, it's well recognized, even in the plant treaty. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, and really thank you for inviting me to participate and to share some of the experiences of the Rural Women's Assembly. My name is Marcia Andrews, and I am the regional coordinator for the Rural Women's Assembly. The Rural Women's Assembly is a women's movement, a grassroots women's movement of farmers, fishers, farm workers, small-scale producers across the region. We are located in 10 countries in Southern Africa. Today, we thought, or one of the things that we wanted to share with you is about our activism and how we see ourselves, how we've constructed and co-constructed a way of building a movement. So I think one of the critical issues of the Rural Women's Assembly is that we are very strong on the slogan that says, nothing about us without us. Now, it does seem like a cliche, but it is quite important and quite central to the idea of self-organization, and also about our own agency and our own voice. So one of the critical things that I think the Rural Women's Assembly has tried to do from the onset is to say that we are a movement that is based from the village upwards, and our task is to struggle to access land for food and to build alternatives, because unless we build alternatives that can challenge the dominant food systems, that can challenge patriarchy, that can challenge the rule of men, etc., we are simply just going to be doing more of the same, the normal things, as it were. And we wanted to say we want to shake the normal, because it is the normal that has given us the situation that we're in the region at the moment, the extreme inequality, the extreme poverty, the extreme underdevelopment, and so on. So for us, some of these things are critical. So part of what we do as our activism is we annually organize or around a particular campaign. And one of the campaigns I thought I would talk about today is the Farmer Input Subsidy Program, FISIP. We all know FISIP in the region because it's supposed to be a support for smallholder farmers, for producers, and so on. And one of the things that we did through a participatory action research, all the countries that we are involved in went around finding out about FISIP, who gets FISIP, how do you receive it, what do you feel about it, and so on and so on. And we wrote these little stories about how we see the Farmer Input Subsidy Program, etc. So from there, we decided that we would organize a very big speak out. And we always organize these speak outs, these very big public public spaces where the women can come from across the region to gather together. And one of the big speak outs we organized was in Namibia a few years ago. And this speak out was organized as part of the Southern African Heads of State meeting. Every year in August, there is the governments of our regions gather together and they make policy for SADC. And we thought we would use the space, the people's space, parallel space, where we would organize the speak out, and we would get women to talk about how they see FISIP, what's happening at the country levels, etc. And to the speak out, we invited representatives of the Namibian Ministry of Agriculture. We invited the SADC Secretariat and so on. And women came with their complaints, their issues, stories of sexual harassment, stories of party, political giving of the subsidies. All these kinds of issues were raised. And we wanted SADC to give explanation. What is happening? Why has this happened? Etc., etc. We took the demands of women. We marched to where the SADC heads of states, where they were meeting, and the women handed over their petitions. We followed this up with a further meeting with the SADC heads of states and the women organize themselves again. And we decided to take more and more public spaces. Women from the different countries decided to join a regional process where we could begin to highlight the way in which the SADC has allowed our agricultural budget, the agricultural purse that should be going to small farmers, how we've allowed it to be captured by the multinational corporations, especially the seed companies and so on. So we got women to take these issues up at country level as well. People went to the offices in their respective countries to demand answers. Where is our subsidy going? How much of the subsidy is going to women? How much of the subsidy is being spent on organic seeds, etc.? And more we were beginning to see that the farmer input subsidy program literally was not benefiting us. The 10% of agriculture budget that's supposed to be used across the region wasn't being used. So we chose this issue, this single issue, and we began to build our campaign around this issue. We have begun to also take this issue to the AU, where we had a delegation of women going and handing in our report card, which said this is happening at the different country levels where our agricultural budget was not reaching ordinary grassroots women and so on. So I think we have seen as the Rural Women's Assembly that if we take an issue, a concrete issue that's very close to women, where they feel an issue that they feel quite passionate about, we can begin to build self-organization. We can begin to look at the synergies across the region. We can learn where else should we go, how else should we expose what our government is doing, and so on. And we've continued with the FSIP program. We've begun to look at whether we can organize representation to the UN Special Rapporteur on Food. That's our follow-up meeting where we begin to bring our stories, to begin to challenge what women are saying about their exclusion and their marginalization from a subsidy that should also be supporting grassroots women. So we've used this as quite a big issue to mobilize around. So this is just one example of how we've used public spaces to try and build our momentum, to surface the issue, to profile also our own alternatives during these moments. Now, often people ask us, so what have you achieved? So I think we've achieved a lot. Some of it is very soft achievements. I use the word soft reservedly. By soft, I mean we've been able to build a consciousness amongst rural women that they have the power to take forward their own issues. They have the power to articulate their own needs. And I think the Rural Women's Assembly in the last 10 years have really taken forward the issue of seed sovereignty. They've defended their right to control their own seeds, to organize their seeds. They've defied the acts and the laws that's been introduced. That, I think, is an extremely powerful act when rural women say, no, this is what we are going to do. I also think that another or several other important issues that we have done in the last 10 years is to have a movement, a consistent movement in the region, organized by rural women themselves across the region. There is no big sister NGO or big brother peasant organization, etc. These are our allies, but they are not in the leadership of the Rural Women's Assembly. Women lead themselves and take forward their own issues, etc. So in different ways, the Rural Women's Assembly have articulated a power of their own in many, many different ways, and have created, I think, a material base of alternatives that I think they can build on, and that I think they can feel very confident about. So here is a social movement in practice where I think to be able to have sustained itself over the last 10 years is something that in itself is quite an important achievement. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to be sharing some of this way in which we organize with you today. It's really been good to be with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. I think the very interesting points coming out there from Heidi, Mara, and Marcia. It's all about why we need to have agroecology movements, the experiences on the Western Africa seed systems, and also how Rural Women's Assembly is actually able to articulate issues from a regional point of view, reaching out to make sure at least that there are some change that we have to anticipate for, especially when we look at the movement on agroecology. Maybe now we have to come to the question and answer session. Is it Steph?
Yes, thanks, Nelson. So now we open the floor for the discussion. So it can be specific questions to the presenters that are with us, including Heidi, who just joined us. Welcome. And otherwise, just general discussion, any comments, any thoughts, anything that struck you during those presentations, reflection already that may have been sparked by listening to this four leaders in thinking about social movement. So it's over to you. And if possible, whenever someone wants to speak, if you can switch on your video, it's much nicer. You can also use the chat box to share your reflections or your questions. So over to you, participants. So it was quite a lot, but at the same time, I'm sure you heard similarities, even though sometimes it was from the perspective of an academic like Heidi, sometimes more from a farmer's perspective with Nelson's and Famara's presentations, and sometimes from human movement perspective. Quite a lot of.
Hi.
On the camera, go ahead.
So one thing that I've been sort of I think that the most recent presentation has given us a very good example of what's happening. However, I do still think that maybe there is a very good discussion to be had around a question that was raised earlier that talks about the issue of the agenda ownership. Who owns the agenda? How do you frame the agenda? I mean, I think that we could actually learn from case studies, but also I think I would like to hear sort of some kind of understanding and get some kind of understanding around how do you help the people shape the agenda, because sitting here as a person who is well traveled, well connected, I get to hear all of these things, but not everybody in my community will get it first time, and also, yeah, I guess it's all about that. How do you shape the agenda ownership, and what are the things that perhaps someone who's moving from nothing to actually getting started in these things can go about doing that?
Thanks very much, Lunga. I don't know, Nelson or Heidi, if you want to say something in response to Lunga's concern.
I can say something. I think, I don't know if Marcia is not with us, is she?
No, she's not, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Because I've been really privileged to go to quite a few of the Rural Women's Assemblies gatherings over the years, and they really are some of the most inspiring events. And I think the most exciting thing is the way they shape the agenda, and a lot of it starts just from bringing rural women together and sharing very personal stories about their lives and their challenges. And out of that, the agenda seems to grow quite organically. And then, as Marcia said, also having various alliances, those agendas feed into bigger social movement agendas across the globe. And I think they've also been quite careful about how they use donor funds and making sure that the way they work is always very, not staying in fancy hotels, not having big per diems. So there's quite a big focus on not being too dependent on donors who do tend to shape a lot of the agenda. And I didn't get to say anything in my talk about some of that I've been looking into, and the way that donor funding and sort of outcomes-based log frame donor funding continues to shape agendas, and some of the difficulty of how we get out of that habit. I think it is a habit. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Heidi. Nelson, perhaps from your perspective,
Yes.
how is your agenda shaped? Do you feel
Yes,
like
yes.
maybe manipulated, or?
Yeah, it's all about, in fact, I will give the example of the current climate crisis, where many of the farmers are actually suffering the impact, and some may not know exactly what could be the way to go, and how should we maybe start that kind of a discussion. And yeah, it's always from the grassroots, you'll find there are some influential characters who actually are able to bring people together, whereby they can sit together and they will then maybe start to have some kind of dialogues. Dialogues are very, very important. They always give that space for everyone to be able to talk, and also everyone to be able to see for themselves, and maybe contribute to the kind of an agenda. Like I mentioned before, that it is very important to build numbers, because when we have numbers, you actually increase the weight of the voice, because the voice on numbers is quite powerful to influence a change. And then there is the issue of setting up some examples. It's always useful to say, no, here is the alternative. If this is not working well, what is the alternative? And it's important for people to see the alternative, not to just listen to the words from the mouth, but they will need to see how that experience is unfolding, and how it is then going to contributing to setting up some kind of a struggle, which have to be defined by equal participants, you know, without any hierarchy, but equal participants, whether you are a graduate from a university or you are just a peasant farmer, but you have to treat yourself at equal levels and try to dialogue in a very smooth and open kind and participatory way, where every factor that has to come in is considered as useful, then is taken on board to influence that setting of an agenda.
Thanks,
Hello.
Yeah, I hope it.
Hi.
Some of your concerns.
Yes, I think very well. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead quickly, and then we give the floor to.
Yeah. Well, I think that I think I met a gentleman from Kenya who's using a system from, I think that has been used by World Vision for a long time, in order to help people to find ways to sort of shape, to as a community come together and think about what they actually. And I find that in many civil society organizations, shared sort of word across the continent, this is quite something that is missing, where we go in and then the sort of methods of community engagement seem not to be very effective in bringing across the ownership, where people can actually identify their community, see what the problems are, come up with their planning and everything, so that they can be able to then own that agenda that they can set. So, for instance, if we had this stuff that you're talking about, and we went into a community, we would be talking about it as a beginning, whereas in fact we should be talking about what the community is thinking about without any thing that we come with. I find that this is one of the biggest lack, as I see most of the organizations that come into communities, especially the one that I work with. That is the biggest lack that I think we need to think about. I'm sure from an AI point of view, this seems to be like a developing method or a developing area that maybe we need to put more emphasis on, to make sure that it can move forward in ways that will empower the community to be able to act on facilitators from outside.
Thanks very much, Lunga. I will refer you to what some of what Nelson was saying. A key approach that he uses, and with the rest of his farming community, is this what he called community dialogues, with no preconceived agenda, just to sit, under the trees or wherever and discuss issues, and from that decide what to do for the community. So I'll invite you to further talk to Nelson about that. And this is also what some of other Sky partners have started to do. This community dialogues, which is quite a long-term process, but it looks like it addresses some of these issues you were mentioning, like any external agenda, just the process being owned by the community from the beginning to throughout, the implementation and so on. So I'll just invite you to continue the conversation with Nelson and other Sky people on that. Anybody else? Any other reflections, questions, concerns, highlights from the 4 presentations? thoughts? Okay, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Kuli, I can see your hand raised. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi, Steph. Thanks so much for taking my hand. I haven't got a question per se, just to thank you guys for these wonderful presentations that you have lovingly provided for us. I mean, where I live, it's like in my community, none of us, in fact, many people know nothing about agroecology. And I live in the Eastern Cape, and we suffer a lot with droughts and stuff like that. So it is like quite a very, very welcomed initiative. I mean, I have come across agroecology maybe about 1.5 years ago when I attended like a rural school. So I'm still quite new into it, but the little bit that I have tried, it has made a tremendous impact on how I use my land. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's really nice to hear that you've already kind of been influenced by us, by these webinars. So we look forward to continuing the conversation with you and yeah, keep providing some insights from us. Anybody else? Even from the Sky family? Any comments, thoughts? Maybe something we'd like to stress from the 4 presentations. Maybe it was a lot for people to digest. Okay, so one last chance. Otherwise, we'll finish there and go to the next session. I'm aware that we're quite late in the program, so maybe people want to go to the next session. Okay, so thanks very much to the 4 presenters and for Nelson and Heidi to be there for participating in the discussion and for the questions and comments. I think we can go now to the next session and close our series of webinars. And as I said at the beginning, we'll start with a very short reflection on how it went and how the experience was for you of this webinar. So you may have attended the 3 of them, or maybe only 1 of them. But yeah, just it's still an experience. So the way we're going to do it is, sorry, I need to go here. It's just to ask these 2 questions to you, very broad questions. What have been the main highlights for you from this 3 webinars? So you remember the first one, which was just a broad introduction to agroecology. What is agroecology all about? The second one focusing on agroecology as a science, a knowledge system, and as a practice. And this one focusing on social movement. So just from the top of your head, what were the main highlights? And then the second question is, what suggestions could you make to improve the experience? You can also think about how was the experience in general, how was it useful to you, in what way, and maybe also give us some feedback on whether your understanding of agroecology has grown or has changed as a result of attending these webinars. And maybe also please share with us any gaps you see in those webinars. So not so much time, and we didn't ask you to prepare, so really what's come up for you with these 2 questions, and we'll give you individually. So we don't have time to do group discussion. So we'll give you 2-3 minutes to write down your thoughts, and then everybody comes back to plenary, and we share. So you can share orally or you can share in the chat box. But it's very important to us to hear some feedback from you. So we'll do that first, and then I'll hand over to Elfrida for closing with going back to the training course and the next steps towards the running of this course and enrolling in the course. But first, I'll leave you with these 2 questions and any feedback you can provide us on this series of introductory webinars. So 2-3 minutes, and then we come back to plenary. Okay, so I think it's 2-3 minutes. So, and hopefully you had time to write down a few thoughts, and you are ready to share with us. So back to plenary, and whoever wants to start, or either, as I said, just open your mic and say, or just use the chat box. So I can see Stan has already put something in the chat box. Thank you. So it's more like, yeah, suggestions on building the mass that we need for the social movement. Thanks. Lunga, go ahead.
Thank you, Steph. So I think that my highlight was the one about landscaping, and what that did was that it helped me to see AI not only as something that I can do in my backyard, which has been the thing that I've been sort of thinking about, but that AI is gonna actually be more effective if whole communities buy into it. And so I have actually improved my thinking about AI. It is more whole encompassing in many ways. First, that it must include all aspects, not just households, because up to this far I've been thinking about like households. Obviously that is a level, but it needs to go beyond that, and I've appreciated AI because of that.
Thank you so much, Lunga. Just a point of correction, this is not AI, this is AE. I think it's a major difference.
AE, sorry, what? I don't know why am I saying AI, sorry, AE, sorry guys.
We thought about that. I think it's a bit problematic for us as AE movement, actually. Thank you so much, Lunga. Very, very interesting that you picked up landscape level, which is also for us the new way to go, actually. Yeah, thanks. Anybody else? I can see in the chat also Koli has contributed, but maybe Lawrence, you've got your hands up. Go ahead, Lawrence.
Yeah, thanks, Steph, and thanks to everyone who contributed and come to these webinars. I'll say my general highlights before I leave, because I might have to leave now for another task.
Sure.
Generally, what I've noticed and learned from all webinars is that we've got a group of resourceful personnel and characters. People within us have got a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge that we should use. We should tap on them, and while they are still alive. And that also raised an interest. The information that I received raised an interest, and maybe also raised other people's interest. That this was a taste, this was introduction. And of course, there's bigger depth planning process coming next year, it has raised a lot of interest to come and learn more, go deeper. And how is it helped me in terms of changing? I'll find myself that I need to, I realize that I need to learn more and I need to do more. I've been so involved in this game, but I do feel like there's a lot I need to do extra to help my community as well as to help myself and the family. And the improvements that I think we need to do when we plan further is improve on timing and planning. We do underestimate the presenter's time as well as the discussion. I think all of them we were over with 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So we need to polish that in future. Thank you, Steph, and thanks to everyone. I might have to leave after this.
Thank you very much, Lawrence, for your very valuable feedback as usual. I think all of us also feel this is an ever-learning journey. That's also the beauty about agroecology, I think. And point taken for areas of improvement. I think we all agree we have to improve on that. Thank you very much, Lawrence, and we'll meet again very soon. Thanks for being also attending the 3 webinars, despite your very busy schedule. Anybody else who feels like speaking?
Yes, yeah, Florence.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Florence.
Okay, yeah. In fact, let me be honest with you. Previously, I didn't thought that this can be possible. Looking at the situations and whatever we have gone through as a country, I was thinking like maybe it's just a joke or people just want to make it fun. But after the first webinar, it made me realize that, I think this is possible. And also looking at, there were also women here who were presenters, that made me realize also that if these women can do it, I can also do it in my country. So really these webinars have made me to change my mindset that it is possible, and I'll need to keep running for and push for extra money. Also, I don't know. Okay, where can I start from? So during the second webinar, there was that you start level at whatever amount of area you can be able to reach to. So I said, okay, so I'll have a place where I'll need to start for myself, and then we'll go on. Then to this movement as a social movement, yeah, seriously, I'll bring a change to somebody. But the highlight, the main highlight that for me was the indigenous knowledge versus the scientific, should I say concepts? I don't know. That one really has been my challenge, especially looking at the climate change issues in the area where we are working. It's really a problem, and we have been fighting. So after that webinar session, I took that as a plus for me, that I will really go out there and show and also convince the communities that really you have something for yourself, you can do it, and that we can be able to produce despite the climate change, but we can be able to change our lives. So Lily, that one. And seriously today on the local women, the movement about
Okay, I think we've lost Florence, but very powerful. Are you still with us, Florence?
Yeah, I just wanted to finish like that about local movement, local women and the sisters. That was a platform. We start from the scratch. smallholder, women, most of the agricultural productions are done by women. So if I reach more women, it means a lot of communities, a lot of members, a lot of influence to my country. So that's a highlight for me. And thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Florence, for this very detailed and passionate feedback. It's very much appreciated, and it's great to hear that you realize a lot of things from these 3 little webinars. So we look forward to continuing the conversation with you. Anybody else? Okay, I see a hand raised. Koli. Go ahead.
Okay,
and then
yeah.
After.
Thanks, Steph. And I mean, on top of the comment that I've put on the chat, I would also say sometimes it's hard when you are, you know, starting to share this knowledge about agroecology, because most people know nothing about it. Even our extension officers, if you talk about agroecology or permaculture, you know, those phrases, they just look on the other side. And I am so glad with today's presentation, where Nelson have shared, like, there's many movements out there who have done the work successfully, where we can, you know, learn from them and emulate some of the principles that they have used to get, like, their movements going, despite all the challenges that they might have faced as well. So yeah, it has been very encouraging. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So anybody else, and just the last one, I think what we may do also is just to send out an email to get further feedback from those who could not stay with us, and if you feel like also adding, but we can have one last one. Thanks, Vanessa, for your feedback in the chat box. Anybody else? Never. Daniel. Nick, you're also welcome to provide any feedback. Okay, so if there's any other feedback, as I said, we'll probably send out an email. But thank you very much for sharing already, and it's yeah, very gratifying to listen to your positive feedback. And so I'll hand over to Elfrida now for the last part of our webinar, which is going back to the initial objective of attracting interests in the long AE course that we would like to organize mid next year. And so Elf is going to tell us about it again, and also share the next steps towards the course. So over to you, Elf.
Okay, so I'll be quick. Yeah, thank you everybody for the presentations and the enthusiasm for these webinars. I mean, these webinars are really just aimed at skimming the issues, at just dipping our toes into the issues and getting sort of warming up the discussion for the course that's going ahead next year. Yeah, just to go back to the main purpose of this course is really for us, I mean, just as a community of practice within Sky that's been coming on for a few years, there's just really, and focused initially on seed, it's just really clear that we need a group of agroecology experts in Africa, in Southern Africa, that can take this forward and really teach the next generation and spread the message and build the movement, which is very important. So the course will be going ahead, thinking of probably in the middle of next year. Of course, we have the pandemic with us. So depends how that goes, but I think we're quite positive that it will start. We will do the planning early in the year in March. Sort of has to do a little bit with our budget, with the budget time within Sky. So we'll do it then. And so you can expect by the end of March a message to explain the application process. And then, yeah, there are some people, we will set some funding aside to support some people. They will have to go through an interview process. And we'll have to limit the number, but yeah, so we will subsidize the course, of course. So we'll look at how we could do that. And then, yeah, in the meantime, we want to ask you to share this upcoming course in your own network. You might know of somebody that couldn't be here, or that you think would be perfect, or that's in the right position to really become an advocate for agroecology. So in a way, you are now part of the movement. By attending this and by becoming enthusiastic about it. So if you can just start sharing it and spreading the message, that will be great. I think one question that we have is, originally we were intending to have the course for 1 month. But we think sometimes that's difficult, especially for women. That it might be better to have 2 periods of 2 weeks. So I don't know if we didn't really have time to do a survey for that now, but maybe you could drop us a line or stick something in the chat box, just your opinion on that. Travel is a big part of the cost. So the more traveling there is, the less people one can accommodate. So that's an issue. Yeah. So I think maybe Steph wanted to add something, but I think I just think it's amazing that we could pull this off in spite of all this difficult time, and that the interest was sustained by you in this course, and I think in a way has grown. So the journey has really started towards this AE journey, and yeah, look forward to it. That's
okay. Thanks very much, Alf. And I think on that note, we're going to close. So I'm just going to join the thank yous that everybody's been sharing. So thank you, the participants, for your interest in, as Elfrida was saying, for staying committed throughout the 3 webinars, and also the webinars going over time. It's like a marathon each time. Thank you to the organizing team, to all the presenters from the Sky family, but also beyond, and also the people who agreed to moderate some of the sessions. So it feels like it's also part of the movement to contribute to this type of event. To the participant, welcome to the AE movement. I agree with Elf. Whether you're going to enroll or not in the course next year, I think just participating in those webinars and hopefully taking on some of the things that we shared in your life, your work life, your home life, makes you participating in the e-movement now. And as far as our relationship, let's us keep connected and connecting. So just reminding you of the Sky website, where we post news every now and then. You can also join the Facebook page. And as you know, there's the YouTube channel where we're going to post the recording of the webinars. So that's also a way of maybe listening again to some of the presentations and using the comment functionality to keep exchanging. But otherwise, as Elfrida was saying, be on the lookout around March for further news on the AE course. And but let's keep connecting. Thank you so much, everyone. And since we are December, we also wish all of you a nice festive season, and keep safe and healthy. And we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steph.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Cool.